When we talk about emotional disconnection, most people think of it as something that affects relationships, communication, or mood. But what's often overlooked is how deeply it affects the body, how it cuts off the very circuits that make pleasure possible. The human body isn't divided between mind and flesh. It's one continuous current of energy, emotion, and sensation. When one part shuts down, the others follow. So when you disconnect emotionally, your body doesn't just go quiet inside your heart, it goes quiet everywhere. The chemistry of arousal begins with the feeling of safety, trust, and openness. When those emotions are absent, the body's natural response is to protect itself, not to open. Imagine your nervous system like a river. When emotions flow freely, that river moves with strength and rhythm. It nourishes everything it touches. But when stress, shame, or unresolved pain begin to build up, that river gets blocked. The current weakens, the water stagnates, and soon what was once a vibrant stream of aliveness turns still, even numb. Emotional disconnection is that dam. It stops the natural current of life energy that feeds arousal. Arousal isn't simply about stimulation. It's about permission. It's the body's way of saying, yes, I'm ready to receive. I feel safe to open. But when your emotions are disconnected, when you've been hurt, when you've learned to numb to survive, when you've carried too much stress for too long, your body doesn't say yes. It says no. Not because it's unwilling, but because it's protecting you from more overwhelm. Women are especially prone to this kind of disconnection, because from a young age, they're taught to prioritize others' comfort over their own feelings. They learn to smile when they're uncomfortable, to say yes when their bodies mean no, to stay silent when their hearts are screaming. Over time, this habit of emotional self-betrayal becomes so normal that they forget what true feeling even is. The nervous system adapts by numbing, shutting off sensations that once brought joy or excitement. You can see this in how many women talk about their bodies. They describe them as if they're separate things. My body just doesn't respond, or I can't get in the mood. But the truth is, the body is responding to unprocessed emotion, to exhaustion, to feeling unseen or unheard. When you suppress your emotions long enough, you also suppress your arousal, because they live in the same place, your nervous system. Arousal requires the same conditions as emotional expression: relaxation, curiosity, openness, presence. The moment you disconnect from your emotions, your brain activates its survival pathways instead of its pleasure pathways. Adrenaline replaces oxytocin. Cortisol replaces dopamine. The body shifts from receive to defend. And no matter how much external stimulation you add, through touch, fantasy, or effort, the internal switch remains off. Pleasure cannot thrive in a body that feels unsafe. This is why emotional intimacy is such a powerful aphrodisiac. When you feel seen, when you feel understood, when you feel connected, your body begins to relax. The walls come down, blood flow increases, sensation returns. Your body says, I'm home. The more emotionally connected you feel, to yourself and to your partner, the more alive your senses become. Emotional connection is not a luxury. It's the foundation of female arousal. But let's talk about why we disconnect in the first place. Often it begins with pain, emotional or physical. Maybe there was a time when you felt deeply rejected, criticized, or shamed for your body or your desires. Maybe there was trauma that taught your nervous system that being open equals being vulnerable to harm. The brain is incredibly adaptive. It learns that shutting down is safer than feeling too much. It builds protective barriers made of numbness. These barriers keep you safe in moments of danger, but they also block the very sensations that make life vibrant. Emotional disconnection also comes from overstimulation. Ironically, from too much doing, too much pressure, too much demand. When the mind is constantly multitasking, worrying, or striving, there's no space left for feeling. You can't be in fight or flight mode and in pleasure at the same time. The body simply doesn't allow it. Arousal lives in the parasympathetic nervous system, the state of rest, digest, and connect. But emotional disconnection traps you in the sympathetic state, alert, defensive, busy. Even when you're still, your mind is racing. Even when you're touched, your body isn't there. The irony is, most people try to fix their lack of arousal by adding more stimulation, more intensity, more pressure, more effort. But what the body really needs is softness. What the body needs is presence, a gentle invitation to come back home. When you reconnect emotionally, when you allow yourself to feel, even the hard feelings, your body begins to thaw. It remembers that it's safe to open again. This is why mindfulness, breathwork, and emotional awareness are not just wellness trends. They're rewiring tools. When you breathe deeply, you tell your nervous system, it's safe now. When you allow tears, laughter, or vulnerability, you clear emotional blockages that have been suppressing pleasure for years. Your body can finally exhale. And with that exhale, sensitivity returns. You might notice it subtly at first, a soft warmth spreading through your chest when you feel love, a tingling under your skin when you let yourself be touched without expectation, a flicker of desire when you hear your partner's voice or feel your own breath deepen. These are signs that emotional reconnection is happening, not through force, but through presence. Emotional reconnection doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process of learning to trust your own feelings again, to stop judging them, to see them not as obstacles but as messengers. When you start to honor what you feel, anger, sadness, joy, desire, you become more attuned to your body's wisdom. Every emotion carries energy, and when you allow it to move through you, it frees the pathways of arousal. There's a profound link between emotional expression and sexual responsiveness. Studies have shown that women who suppress emotions report significantly less satisfaction in intimacy. It's not because their bodies are broken, but because their emotions are trapped. Emotion and sensation share the same highway. When traffic is blocked on one side, it clogs the other. When you open emotionally, you open sexually. So, what does it mean to reconnect emotionally? It means becoming curious about your inner world again, asking yourself, what am I really feeling right now? And letting the answer be whatever it is, without judgment. It means slowing down long enough to notice the subtle sensations that accompany emotion, the tightness in your throat when you're holding back tears, the flutter in your stomach when you're nervous, the expansion in your heart when you feel seen. These physical sensations are the bridge between emotion and arousal. Touch can also become a tool for emotional reconnection. Not sexual touch at first, just human touch. Placing a hand over your heart, feeling your breath move beneath it, touching your own skin with the intention of saying, I'm here. When you touch yourself with awareness, you remind your nervous system that it's safe to be felt again. Slowly, the numbness begins to fade. This is why pleasure is not just about the body, it's about emotional honesty. You can't fake connection, and you can't perform presence. Your body knows the truth. It responds not to fantasy, but to authenticity. When your emotions and your sensations align, arousal flows naturally. It doesn't have to be forced or chased. It arises effortlessly from the body's innate intelligence. In many ways, reclaiming arousal is an act of emotional courage. It asks you to feel what you've been avoiding, to face the grief, the disappointment, the anger that's been hiding beneath the surface. But the moment you allow those feelings to surface, you also make space for joy, desire, and intimacy. You can't selectively numb. When you numb pain, you numb pleasure too. To feel fully alive again, you have to be willing to feel it all. The process might feel uncomfortable at first. Emotional reconnection can stir memories or sensations that you've kept buried. But that discomfort is healing in motion. It's energy moving again. It's life returning. And every time you breathe through it instead of shutting down, you teach your body that it's safe to stay open. Women who learn to reconnect emotionally often describe a sense of rediscovery, not just of pleasure, but of self. They begin to notice color, taste, and sound more vividly. Their laughter becomes deeper, their relationships more intimate, their confidence more natural. They no longer feel disconnected from their own bodies, because they've made peace with their feelings. The numbness lifts, replaced by a quiet electricity that hums beneath the surface of daily life. You see, emotional disconnection is not permanent. It's a pattern, not a prison. And the same brain that learned to shut down can learn to reopen. The same heart that felt too much can learn to feel safely again. The same body that went numb can rediscover its spark. It's not about trying to be more sexual, it's about becoming more alive. That aliveness begins with truth. With asking yourself, what parts of me have I silenced? Where have I been holding back? What emotions am I afraid to feel? Because behind each of those questions lies a doorway, one that leads you back into your body, back into connection, back into pleasure. And when you walk through that doorway, something extraordinary happens. You begin to realize that your body was never the enemy. It was always waiting for your attention, your care, your willingness to listen. Once you give it that, it responds with gratitude, with electricity. The journey from emotional disconnection to arousal isn't about doing more. It's about feeling more. It's about replacing judgment with compassion. It's about remembering that pleasure is not frivolous. It's foundational. It's how your body celebrates being alive. When you honor that, every breath, every touch, every moment becomes a chance to reconnect with the deepest truth of who you are. Stress and shame are two of the most powerful inhibitors of the body's natural pleasure response. They work quietly, invisibly, weaving themselves into the body's chemistry until pleasure begins to feel like a distant memory rather than a natural rhythm. When stress takes over, your body shifts from creation to survival. When shame enters, your body stops trusting itself. Both cut off the same energy that fuels arousal, desire, and emotional intimacy. To understand how, we need to see pleasure not as a luxury, but as a biological function, something the body is designed to experience. Pleasure isn't a distraction from life. It's life-affirming. It keeps you balanced, grounded, and alive. But when stress and shame dominate, they hijack the very systems that make pleasure possible. Let's start with stress. In its simplest form, stress is the body's response to a perceived threat. It doesn't matter whether that threat is physical, emotional, or even imagined. Your nervous system reacts the same way. The hypothalamus sends signals to release cortisol and adrenaline, flooding your bloodstream with the chemistry of alertness. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, and blood flow is redirected away from non-essential systems like digestion, immunity, and, yes, sexual arousal. Your body isn't thinking about pleasure. It's thinking about survival. The female arousal system, however, is exquisitely sensitive to environment and emotion. It thrives on relaxation, connection, and safety. When the body is in fight or flight mode, it can't enter the receptive state required for pleasure. Imagine trying to open a delicate flower in a hurricane. It's not that the flower is incapable of blooming. It's that the environment won't allow it. Chronic stress becomes that hurricane, constantly blowing through the body, preventing sensitivity, blood flow, and openness. In modern life, stress rarely comes from tigers chasing us. It comes from unrelenting pressure, unprocessed emotions, and overstimulation. It comes from perfectionism, from trying to hold everything together, from worrying about being enough. And yet the body doesn't distinguish between emotional and physical danger. Whether you're running from a predator or running from a deadline, your body shuts down the same pathways that would otherwise light up with pleasure. When cortisol levels remain high for too long, they dampen the production of estrogen and oxytocin, the hormones of connection, warmth, and sensuality. These are the very hormones that support vaginal lubrication, blood flow, and relaxation. Without them, arousal feels forced or absent. Stress literally pulls the plug on the body's electrical system of desire. Even when you want to feel, your body simply can't respond. But stress doesn't act alone. Shame is its silent partner. And together, they create a powerful wall against pleasure. Shame is the emotion of unworthiness. It whispers that you don't deserve joy, that your body is wrong, that your desires are too much or not enough. Unlike guilt, which says, I did something bad, shame says, I am bad. It's not about behavior. It's about identity. And when shame takes root in the body, it seeps into every cell, tightening muscles, constricting breath, dulling sensation. Many women carry layers of shame they didn't choose. It comes from cultural conditioning, from silence around sexuality, from being told that pleasure is selfish or shameful. It comes from trauma, from judgment, from being compared or objectified. Over time, shame becomes internalized, so much so that even thinking about pleasure triggers discomfort or fear. The brain associates pleasure with danger or disapproval, and the body follows suit by shutting down. Shame lives in the body like armor. It tenses the shoulders, tightens the jaw, contracts the pelvic floor. This tension might feel subtle, but it blocks the natural flow of blood and energy needed for arousal. Pleasure is an act of surrender, of allowing, of receiving. Shame, however, is an act of control. It keeps you locked in self-surveillance, constantly monitoring whether you're doing it right, whether you look acceptable, whether you're allowed to feel what you feel. In that state, You're no longer present with sensation. You're trapped in your head. And when you're in your head, your body goes silent. The link between stress, shame, and numbness is not accidental. It's neurological. The parts of the brain that regulate pleasure and arousal, like the limbic system and hypothalamus, are also responsible for processing emotion. When you experience chronic stress or internalized shame, those regions become dominated by the amygdala, the brain's fear center. It floods your system with signals of danger, overriding the slower, subtler signals of desire. In this state, even gentle touch can feel intrusive. Even love can feel like pressure. Pleasure requires openness, but fear demands closure. When you think about it, shame and stress both speak the same language: tension. The body braces itself against feeling too much. Breath becomes shallow, posture collapses, awareness narrows. You disconnect from the body not because you want to, but because it feels safer that way. Over time, this disconnection becomes habitual. You stop noticing your hunger, your fatigue, your sensuality. You start living from the neck up, where everything can be controlled and explained. But pleasure doesn't live in the mind, it lives in the body. And as long as you're disconnected from that body, pleasure can't reach you. The healing begins when you start to understand this pattern not as weakness, but as wisdom. Your body isn't broken, it's intelligent. It shuts down pleasure because somewhere deep inside, it learned that pleasure was unsafe. Maybe it was unsafe to be seen. Maybe it was unsafe to be vulnerable. Maybe it was unsafe to enjoy yourself when others expected you to serve. Whatever the reason, the body adapted. But adaptation isn't destiny. Once safety is restored, the body remembers how to open again. This is where compassion becomes medicine. When you meet your stress and shame with understanding instead of judgment, you interrupt the cycle. You create a new message for your nervous system. It's okay now. You're safe to feel. Each breath, each moment of self-kindness, lowers cortisol, increases oxytocin, and signals to your body that it can relax. And when the body relaxes, pleasure naturally follows. Consider what happens when you laugh. Really laugh. Your entire physiology shifts. Muscles release, breathing deepens, blood flows, and your heart rate synchronizes with joy. That's the same system that underlies arousal. It's not about technique. It's about chemistry. Joy, safety, and pleasure all live in the same neighborhood of the nervous system. When you nurture one, you awaken the others. Healing from shame requires bringing hidden things into the light. It's about speaking what was silenced, naming what was denied. When women share their stories of body image, of desire, of pain, they begin to dissolve the secrecy that keeps shame alive. Every time you say, "me too," shame loses power. Every time you look at your body with softness instead of criticism, shame weakens its grip. And every time you allow yourself to feel pleasure without apology, you reclaim another piece of your freedom. Stress and shame feed on silence and disconnection. They can't survive in environments of openness and compassion. This is why mindfulness and self-touch are so transformative. They bring awareness back into the body, where healing happens. When you touch your own skin with intention, you re-establish communication between your brain and your body. You say, "This is me. I belong here." Even something as simple as deep breathing can shift your chemistry. With each slow exhale, cortisol decreases, heart rate slows, and blood flow returns to the parts of the body responsible for arousal. The key is consistency, not intensity. You don't need to force pleasure. You need to make space for it. That might mean slowing down your mornings, walking barefoot, stretching, journaling, or engaging in any ritual that invites you into your body. Pleasure isn't just sexual, it's sensory. The warmth of sunlight, the sound of rain, the scent of your own skin. These are all forms of pleasure that retrain the nervous system to associate feeling with safety. As the body begins to trust again, something shifts. The same heart that felt heavy starts to flutter with life. The same body that felt unresponsive starts to hum with quiet electricity. This transformation doesn't come from external validation. It comes from internal permission. The more you honor your stress and shame as messengers rather than enemies, the more easily you can release them. And what's left underneath isn't emptiness, it's energy. Pure, vibrant, sensual energy that's been waiting to move. One of the most powerful ways to dismantle shame is through connection. Real, vulnerable connection. When you allow yourself to be seen in your rawness, without performance. You invite love to meet you where you are. The paradox is that what we fear most, being seen, is also what heals us. When someone looks at you without judgment, when they honor your body as sacred instead of flawed, your nervous system rewrites its story about what's safe. You start to realize that you don't have to hide anymore. Stress begins to fade when you stop fighting your own experience. Shame begins to fade when you stop believing you are unworthy of love. Together, their departure creates the space for pleasure to return, not as a goal, but as a natural outcome of peace. The body is always trying to find its way back to balance. When you remove what blocks it, fear, pressure, guilt, it doesn't take long for that balance to reemerge. And this is where the magic begins. As your stress softens and your shame dissolves, you begin to notice small awakenings. The warmth in your belly, the way your breath deepens when you allow yourself to rest, the way touch feels more alive when you stop judging it. These moments are proof that your pleasure system was never broken. It was simply waiting for the noise to quiet down. Every woman has this power within her. The power to shift from tension to tenderness, from judgment to joy. The body knows how to heal when given permission to feel. You don't have to force arousal. It's your body's natural response when it feels safe, free, and loved. So when you think about stress and shame, don't see them as barriers you must fight. See them as signals guiding you home. Stress says, slow down. Shame says, you've forgotten your worth. Listen to them, honor them, then let them go. Because beneath them lies your true nature, one that is radiant, receptive, and deeply alive. The journey back to pleasure is not about escaping stress or erasing shame. It's about transforming your relationship to them. It's about learning to breathe in the middle of chaos and love yourself in the middle of imperfection. When you do, your body responds not just with arousal, but with gratitude, with life itself returning to every cell. The body is a living network of energy, sensation, and awareness, a delicate dance of blood flow, nerves, and emotion. When that flow is interrupted by stress, tension, or neglect, the entire system begins to dull. Pleasure fades not because desire disappears, but because the pathways that carry it become constricted. Reigniting sensitivity is not about forcing arousal. It's about restoring connection. It's about reintroducing circulation. Through blood, through touch, through mindfulness, back into the parts of ourselves that have gone quiet. Blood flow is the language of aliveness. Every pulse, every heartbeat, every rush of warmth carries oxygen and energy to the tissues that make pleasure possible. When you feel aroused, what you're really feeling is circulation, your blood moving toward sensitivity, your body preparing to open. But when the mind is under stress or the body has been disconnected for too long, blood flow decreases. The pelvic region, rich in nerve endings and blood vessels, becomes undernourished. The result is numbness, dryness, or low responsiveness, not because the body is broken, but because it's not being fed. Think of it like this. Your body is an instrument, and blood flow is the music. Without it, the instrument still exists, but it doesn't resonate. The keys are there, the strings are intact, but no sound emerges until energy begins to move again. Increasing circulation is the first step toward reawakening that music, and this can't be done through willpower. It happens through softness, breath, and movement. One of the simplest yet most powerful ways to increase blood flow is through mindful breathing. When you take a deep, slow breath, your diaphragm moves downward, creating a gentle massage for your internal organs and pelvic floor. This rhythmic expansion and contraction stimulates circulation naturally. Each inhale delivers oxygen. Each exhale releases tension. Over time, this practice begins to restore life to areas that have felt dormant. Touch amplifies this process. Not mechanical, rush touch, but conscious touch, the kind that asks nothing and listens to everything. The human skin is covered with millions of sensory receptors that communicate directly with the brain. When touched with intention, these receptors activate parasympathetic responses, the body's state of calm and connection. In this state, blood flow increases, heart rate stabilizes, and the body begins to open again. Touch is more than physical. It's emotional communication. When you touch yourself or are touched by another with presence, you send a message. This body is safe. This body deserves to feel, and the body listens. Over time, it begins to trust again, to soften, to awaken. The areas that once felt numb start to tingle, as if remembering what they were designed for. But for many people, touch has been associated with performance, pressure, or expectation. That conditioning must be rewritten through mindfulness. Mindfulness brings awareness back to the present moment, where sensation lives. When you bring your full attention to your body, to the way your skin feels under your fingertips, to the rhythm of your breathing, to the warmth of your own heartbeat, you begin to bridge the gap between mind and body. This union is the birthplace of sensitivity. Reigniting sensitivity through mindfulness doesn't mean striving for climax. It means cultivating curiosity. It's about learning to feel without judging what you feel. Maybe your body responds instantly, or maybe it takes time. Either way, the practice is to stay present, to keep listening. Sensitivity grows in the soil of attention. The more you pay attention, the more the body learns that it's safe to speak. Blood flow, touch, and mindfulness form a powerful trinity of restoration. Blood flow nourishes the tissues, touch awakens the nerves, and mindfulness keeps the mind from leaving the experience. When these three align, sensitivity blooms effortlessly. It's like turning on the lights in a room that's been dim for years. You begin to notice the textures of your own existence again. The warmth, the vibration, the quiet electricity moving beneath your skin. Let's talk about the science behind this. When blood flow increases to the genitals, the sensory receptors become more responsive. The clitoris, for example, has over 8,000 nerve endings, more than any other part of the human body, and all of them depend on proper circulation. Healthy blood flow means healthy oxygenation, which means heightened sensitivity. The same is true for the entire pelvic area. It's one of the most vascular regions of the body. When you move, breathe deeply, or engage in mindful touch, you're literally feeding those tissues with life. Touch also releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Oxytocin counteracts cortisol, the stress hormone, creating a state of calm and safety. This biochemical shift is essential for arousal because the body can only experience pleasure when it feels secure. Every gentle stroke, every breath of awareness, every act of mindful presence reinforces that safety. Over time, the nervous system recalibrates from defense to receptivity. Mindfulness deepens this process by changing the brain's relationship to sensation. In a distracted or self-critical mind, sensations are filtered through judgment. I'm not feeling enough. I'm taking too long. I'm doing it wrong. These thoughts pull you out of your body and back into anxiety. But when you practice mindfulness, you begin to observe sensation without labeling it. You might notice a warmth spreading through your belly, or tingling in your thighs, or a wave of subtle pleasure moving through your chest. When you stay with those sensations instead of analyzing them, they expand naturally. This is the secret to sensitivity. It doesn't come from doing more. It comes from noticing more. Your body is constantly offering small signals of pleasure, tiny sparks of aliveness that often go unnoticed because your mind is elsewhere. Mindfulness tunes your awareness so finely that even the smallest sensation becomes vivid. And once you learn to feel subtle pleasure, deep pleasure follows effortlessly. Many people don't realize that physical sensitivity and emotional openness are reflections of the same state. When blood flows freely and the body feels safe, emotion flows too. You might notice that as you become more sensitive to touch, you also become more sensitive to life itself, more moved by beauty, more open to laughter, more present with your emotions. This isn't coincidence. It's coherence. Your nervous system is returning to its natural rhythm of receptivity. There's also a profound spiritual element in this process. In many traditions, the pelvic region is seen as the root of life force, the place where creativity and vitality originate. When blood flow and awareness return there, it's not just sexual energy that awakens, it's your entire sense of being. You begin to feel grounded, confident, and deeply connected to yourself. Pleasure then becomes not an act of escape, but of embodiment. It's how you come home to your body. One of the most powerful exercises for reigniting sensitivity is something incredibly simple: slow, mindful self-touch combined with breath. It's not about technique, it's about attention. You can start anywhere: your arms, your face, your thighs. Let your fingers explore slowly, noticing texture, temperature, and response. Breathe deeply, allowing each inhale to bring energy and each exhale to release tension. As you do this regularly, your body begins to map new neural pathways of pleasure. The numbness fades, replaced by a subtle hum of aliveness that grows stronger each day. Another key element is movement. Stillness is healing, but movement is what carries blood and emotion through the body. Dancing, stretching, yoga, even walking can reawaken areas that have been stagnant. Movement invites circulation and helps the nervous system release stored tension. It's not about choreography, it's about freedom. When you move in ways that feel good, you remind your body what it's like to express, rather than suppress. That expression brings energy back to the surface, where it can be felt as sensation. Over time, this combination of movement, touch, and mindfulness creates a profound shift in how you experience yourself. That sensitivity is not something you have to earn. It's something you have to allow. The body wants to feel. It's wired for pleasure. The problem isn't lack of desire. It's disconnection. When you restore circulation and presence, the natural intelligence of the body takes over. It's also important to remember that sensitivity isn't just physical. It's emotional. As you awaken physically, you may also awaken feelings you've buried. Tears might surface, memories might arise, emotions you thought you'd outgrown might reappear. This is part of the healing. The same pathways that carry pleasure also carry emotion. When you open one, you open the other. Meeting those emotions with gentleness allows even deeper pleasure to follow, because every released emotion frees space for more energy to move. In my clinical experience, women who practice mindful touch and breathwork often describe not just an increase in arousal, but a transformation in self-perception. They begin to feel beautiful from the inside out, not because of how they look, but because they feel alive again. Their confidence becomes quiet, natural, magnetic. This is what true sensitivity creates, not dependency on external validation, but an inner radiance that comes from being connected to your own source. The power of blood flow, touch, and mindfulness lies in their simplicity. You don't need complicated tools or formulas. You need presence. The body already knows how to heal, how to feel, how to open. All it asks is that you slow down long enough to listen. Each breath you take, each moment of awareness, each act of kind touch tells your body, "You're safe now. You can come alive again." When that happens, something remarkable unfolds. Sensation returns not just to your skin, but to your soul. Food tastes richer. Laughter feels fuller. The world looks brighter. You become more attuned to life itself. The same blood that nourishes your body nourishes your spirit. The same mindfulness that deepens touch deepens love. And the same sensitivity that awakens pleasure awakens gratitude. This is what it means to reignite sensitivity, not to chase intensity, but to rediscover presence. To feel the pulse beneath your fingertips and know it's the rhythm of your own power. To let touch be a language, breath be a bridge, and awareness be the flame that brings your body back to life. Because when blood flows freely, when touch is conscious, and when mindfulness anchors you in the moment, the body doesn't just awaken. It remembers that it was never truly asleep. It was simply waiting for you to return. Communication and self-awareness are the bridges between isolation and intimacy, between insecurity and confidence. When we lose touch with ourselves, we also lose the language to express what we truly need. And when we can't express it, our partners can't respond to it. So much of the struggle around female arousal isn't that women don't have desire, it's that they've learned to silence it, to protect it, to push it down under layers of "I'm fine, I'm tired," or "it doesn't matter." But the truth is, it does matter. Because when you silence what you feel, you also silence who you are. Self-awareness begins the moment you pause long enough to ask, what do I really feel right now? Not what you think you should feel, not what you think your partner wants you to feel, but what is real. Sometimes the answer is exhaustion. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's longing so deep it hurts to name it. And that honesty, raw, uncomfortable, unfiltered, is the first step toward freedom. Every woman has an inner landscape of emotion that influences her body's responses. The nervous system doesn't separate emotional safety from physical pleasure. When you feel unseen, unheard, or disconnected, your body closes. Your breath shortens. Your muscles tighten. The very pathways that allow arousal to flow, blood, breath sensation, contract in protection. It's not rejection, it's defense. But when you begin to bring awareness to what you feel, when you name it instead of hiding from it, you start to give your body permission to relax again. Communication is the external expression of that internal awareness. It's saying, "This is what I need," or "This doesn't feel right," or "I want to explore something new." It's choosing honesty over performance. It's replacing the silent assumption that your partner should just know with the brave act of telling them. Because arousal doesn't flourish in guessing games. It thrives in safety, trust, and mutual understanding. So many couples live years in a quiet disconnection. They go through the motions, touch out of obligation, and wonder why the spark is gone. But beneath that numbness is often a lack of honest communication. Maybe one person fears rejection. Maybe the other fears failure. And so both remain silent, protecting each other from truth, yet starving the relationship of intimacy. Real connection happens when both people feel safe enough to be vulnerable. When a woman can say, "I feel distant," or "I need more time to connect," and her partner listens, not to defend, but to understand, that's when healing begins. Self-awareness also means learning your own patterns. Noticing what shuts you down and what opens you up. Maybe it's how you talk to yourself in the mirror. Maybe it's the guilt you feel about wanting pleasure at all. Maybe it's the exhaustion that comes from taking care of everyone else before yourself. Awareness transforms all of this from unconscious behavior into conscious choice. Once you see it, you can shift it. Communication, then, becomes a dance between expression and listening, between sharing your inner world and making space for your partners. When you both learn to speak from truth rather than fear, intimacy becomes less about performance and more about presence. You stop asking, "Am I doing this right?" and start asking, "Are we here together right now?" I've seen this in therapy rooms countless times. Couples who haven't touched meaningfully in years suddenly rediscover each other not through physical exercises, but through talking, through the slow unwrapping of years of silence. One woman said to me, "I never told him what I liked because I thought it would make me seem selfish." But when she finally did, something beautiful happened. Not only did their physical connection deepen, but her confidence bloomed. Because when you give voice to what you need, you affirm that your needs matter. Self-awareness builds that confidence from within. You stop seeking validation outside and start recognizing that your worth doesn't depend on your partner's reaction, your body's performance, or society's approval. Confidence isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. About owning your body, your pleasure, your truth. When you know yourself, shame loses its grip. When you understand your boundaries and your desires, you no longer shrink to fit someone else's comfort. In relationships, communication rooted in self-awareness turns intimacy into collaboration. It's no longer about guessing, performing, or pleasing. It's about exploring together. It's about creating an environment where both partners can be curious instead of cautious, where no isn't rejection but redirection, where yes isn't compliance but connection. Mindful communication also transforms conflict. Instead of reacting from pain, you respond from awareness. You might say, "When you touch me that way, I feel distant," rather than, "You never turn me on." The difference is monumental. One approach blames, the other invites understanding. When we communicate from the body's wisdom, not the mind's defense, we open the door to empathy. And empathy is the foundation of confidence. Confidence in intimacy isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting your body's truth. It's about recognizing that your feelings, even the uncomfortable ones, are valid messengers. When you speak them aloud, when you let your partner see the real you, messy, emotional, alive, you reclaim your power. You move from the performance of intimacy to the experience of it. Over time, communication and self-awareness create a feedback loop of safety. The more honest you are, the safer you feel. The safer you feel, the more your body opens. The more your body opens, the deeper the connection becomes. That's the anatomy of confidence. It's built not in the mirror, but in the moments you choose truth over silence. Many women think confidence will come after they fix their relationship, lose the weight, or become better in bed. But confidence comes before all of that. It begins when you start listening to your own needs and honoring them without apology. When you communicate those needs with clarity and kindness, you send a message to yourself and your partner that your pleasure, your body, and your feelings are sacred. Imagine intimacy as a mirror. When you are disconnected from yourself, that mirror reflects uncertainty. But when you are self-aware, that reflection becomes radiant. Your partner senses it. Your presence shifts. The energy between you becomes more alive. This is not a trick or a technique. It's truth embodied. Because the body follows the mind's permission, and the heart follows the body's trust. So many of us were never taught how to talk about these things. We were told to stay quiet, to keep it private, to avoid making others uncomfortable. But silence is what disconnects us. The antidote is voice, not the loud, demanding voice of control, but the steady, grounded voice of self-knowing. When you say, "This is who I am," the world around you adjusts to meet that truth. In relationships built on self-awareness and communication, pleasure becomes less about technique and more about connection. Touch becomes language. Eye contact becomes grounding. Breath becomes a dialogue. And in that space, confidence blooms. Not the kind that needs to be proven, but the kind that simply is. Ultimately, communication and self-awareness are not just tools for better intimacy. They are the foundation of a fulfilled life. When you know yourself, you stop abandoning yourself. When you speak your truth, you stop settling for less than alignment. And when you listen to your body, to your heart, to your partner, you rediscover what it means to be fully alive. Confidence, then, isn't the absence of fear. It's the presence of self-trust. It's standing in your body and saying, "I am here. I am whole. I am worthy of connection, of pleasure, of being seen." And when you live from that place, when you love from that place, you don't just restore connection, you ignite it. You become the spark that reminds the world what real intimacy feels like. Honest, alive, electric. For centuries, the female body has been treated like a mystery, something to be studied, managed or controlled, rather than understood and honored. Even in modern times, despite all our science and progress, this old narrative still lingers. We're surrounded by conversations about how the female body looks, but very few about how it feels, how it functions, how it thrives. And so many women grow up disconnected from the very vessel that carries their power, believing that their biology is confusing, complicated, or somehow shameful. But the truth is the opposite. The female body is not a mystery. It's a masterpiece of intelligence, sensitivity, and creation. It's not something to be fixed or figured out. It's something to be listened to. Understanding the body as a source of power begins with curiosity instead of judgment. When a woman approaches her own body with curiosity, when she begins to ask, "What do I feel here? What does this sensation mean?" she starts to access the wisdom that has always been there. The female body communicates through cycles, rhythms, sensations, and emotions. Every shift in temperature, texture, or mood is information. When we label these fluctuations as problems or inconveniences, we lose access to that information. But when we listen, we begin to realize that our bodies have been guiding us all along, telling us when we need rest, when we need connection, when we need expression, and when we need to let go. Throughout history, the suppression of women's bodies has been tied to the suppression of women's power. Because when a woman understands her body, when she learns what turns her on, what nourishes her, what strengthens her, she becomes harder to control. Knowledge is liberation, and embodiment is the deepest kind of knowledge. It's not theoretical, it's experiential. You can't read your way into it. You have to feel your way into it. When you start to understand your body not as an obstacle, but as an ally, everything changes. You stop fighting it and start collaborating with it. Instead of blaming yourself for fatigue, mood swings, or emotional waves, you start asking what those signals are trying to show you. The body doesn't betray you. It responds to you. It mirrors your emotional state, your environment, your beliefs. When you're disconnected, it tightens and withdraws. When you're aligned, it opens and radiates. This awareness is especially vital when it comes to pleasure. The female body was designed not just to reproduce, but to experience profound joy and connection through sensation. Every part of the arousal system, from the brain to the skin, from the clitoris to the heart, is wired for response. But because pleasure has long been stigmatized or reduced to something external, many women have internalized the belief that their bodies are unpredictable or difficult. The truth is, the female body is responsive, not complicated. It responds to safety, to attention, to presence. When those elements are missing, pleasure becomes elusive. When they're present, pleasure becomes inevitable. Books like Women's Anatomy of Arousal by Sherry Winston illuminate how intricate yet beautifully logical this design is. Blood flow, breath, and energy. These are the body's natural currencies of arousal. They're not random. They're rhythmic. When you understand that your arousal is a physiological response to emotional and energetic safety, you no longer chase desire, you cultivate it. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What do I need to feel safe and open right now?" That shift from blame to understanding is the moment power begins to return. The female body is cyclical by nature, unlike the linear design often seen in male physiology. Hormones rise and fall, energy expands and contracts. But we live in a culture that values constant productivity, constant performance, constant doing. So women learn to push through their natural rhythms, to override the body's call for rest, nourishment, or pleasure. Over time, that suppression leads to burnout, numbness, and disconnection. Understanding your body as powerful means honoring its cycles instead of resisting them. It means realizing that rest isn't weakness, it's regeneration. That sensitivity isn't fragility, it's intelligence. That pleasure isn't indulgence, it's medicine. There's a deep strength in the softness of the female body. It creates, it nurtures, it feels, it transforms. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it flows quietly through blood, breath, and intuition. The more we understand this, the more we redefine what true strength looks like. Strength is not about suppression, it's about connection. A woman connected to her body is a woman connected to her power. She doesn't seek validation through external approval, because her sense of worth comes from within, from her heartbeat, her pulse, her presence. When women begin to understand the language of their bodies, shame starts to dissolve. You realize that your body has never been wrong. It's been misunderstood. The tension, the numbness, the tears that come out of nowhere, they're all forms of communication. The body speaks when the voice cannot. Learning to interpret those messages brings both healing and empowerment. For example, when you notice that stress immediately dulls your desire, that's not a failure, it's information. It means your body is prioritizing survival over sensuality. And when you respond by soothing your nervous system rather than shaming yourself, you realign with your body's wisdom. Understanding the body as power also means reclaiming ownership over it. Too many women have lived with a sense of separation from their own skin, treating their bodies as objects to be managed or improved rather than inhabited and loved. But the body is not an object, it's a partner. Every time you move, breathe, stretch, or touch yourself with awareness, you strengthen that partnership. You remind your body that it is safe, that it belongs to you, that it is not defined by anyone else's gaze. That understanding transforms confidence at the deepest level. When you know your body intimately, not just its shape, but its sensations, its boundaries, its desires, you walk differently. You speak differently. You stop apologizing for existing. Because you are no longer looking for permission to feel good, you're claiming your right to it. The female body also holds incredible creative power, not just the ability to create life, but to create ideas, art, and change. When energy flows freely through the body, creativity expands. When it's blocked by shame or fear, that creativity shrinks. Pleasure and creation are twins. They come from the same life force. That's why women who reconnect to their bodies often find themselves more inspired, more expressive, more alive in every area of their lives. They're not just reclaiming sexual energy, they're reclaiming vital energy. Think of how the world changes when women begin to live from this place of embodied power. When they stop apologizing for their emotions, their curves, their voices, their desires. When they speak from the wisdom of their bodies instead of the fear of rejection. They become leaders, healers, lovers, and creators who inspire others to do the same. This isn't just personal, it's cultural. Every woman who reclaims her body helps dismantle the collective myth that the female form is mysterious, dangerous, or weak. She shows, through her presence, that it is divine intelligence in motion. The truth is, the female body is not something to be solved. It's something to be celebrated. Its cycles are not flaws. They're rhythms. Its sensations are not distractions. They're guides. Its capacity for pleasure isn't frivolous. It's foundational to well-being. When you understand that, Your relationship with your body shifts from control to communion. You no longer try to dominate it. You learn to dance with it. Understanding your body as power also deepens relationships. When you know what feels good, you can guide your partner with confidence. When you know what feels wrong, you can set boundaries without guilt. When you're connected to your inner rhythm, you bring authenticity to intimacy. You no longer fake or perform. You feel. You no longer hide. You express. That kind of embodiment changes everything. There's a passage in The Body Keeps the Score that says, "The body remembers what the mind tries to forget." And that's true not only for trauma, but for pleasure too. The body holds memory, of pain, yes, but also of ecstasy, joy, and connection. When you begin to reconnect with your body, you start to awaken those memories, those pathways. The electricity returns, and with it comes a deep sense of belonging, not to someone else, but to yourself. This is the power of understanding. When the female body is no longer a mystery, it becomes a home, a sacred space of strength, wisdom, and light. It doesn't need to be decoded. It needs to be respected. And when a woman stands in that understanding, when she says, "My body is not a mystery. It's my power," she becomes unstoppable. Her energy changes rooms. Her voice carries weight. Her pleasure becomes her compass. When women reclaim pleasure as their birthright, something profound begins to shift, not just in their bodies, but in their lives, their minds, their relationships, and even in the way they experience the world. Pleasure is not a luxury. It is a vital signal of life force, a measure of health, and a doorway to empowerment. For too long, society has told women that their desire is secondary, that their enjoyment must be quiet, that their needs are negotiable. But when a woman begins to acknowledge, honor, and actively cultivate her pleasure, she awakens a power that has always been hers, hidden only by cultural conditioning, fear, and disconnection. The first transformation is internal. Pleasure reconnects a woman to her body in a way nothing else can. Numbness gives way to sensation. Disconnection gives way to presence. She begins to notice subtle waves of energy, the rhythm of her breath, the pulse of her heartbeat, and the electric spark of her nervous system. Every sensation becomes a signpost of life, every nerve ending a messenger saying, "You are alive. You belong here. You are enough." This reconnection is not superficial. It reaches into the core of self-esteem, reinforcing the understanding that the body is wise, responsive, and inherently deserving of delight. Reclaiming pleasure also reshapes the mind. Shame and self-judgment begin to soften as a woman learns to prioritize her needs without apology. Thoughts like, "I shouldn't want this," or "I'm selfish for feeling this," begin to lose their power, replaced by the quiet, undeniable truth. I am allowed to feel good. I am allowed to want. I am allowed to enjoy myself. This mental shift ripples outward. Confidence blossoms not because of external validation, but because the inner compass of desire and fulfillment has been restored. Pleasure becomes a teacher, guiding a woman to honor her rhythms, recognize her boundaries, and trust her intuition. The transformation extends into relationships as well. When a woman knows her own pleasure, she communicates it more clearly, moves with more presence, and participates in intimacy from a place of authenticity rather than obligation. Partners no longer guess or perform to meet unspoken needs. The energy of honesty and self-awareness changes the entire dynamic. Intimacy deepens, not through technique or choreography, but through connection, empathy, and shared joy. When pleasure is reclaimed as a birthright, it reshapes not just the act of sex, but the entire quality of relational closeness. There is also a creative expansion that occurs. Pleasure is energy, and energy is movement. When women allow themselves to experience pleasure fully, they often notice creativity returning to their lives. Ideas flow more freely, inspiration arrives more easily, and decisions feel aligned rather than forced. This is not accidental. Pleasure stimulates the nervous system, increases circulation, and releases hormones like dopamine and oxytocin, which enhance focus, confidence, and motivation. The reclaiming of pleasure is not indulgent. It is regenerative, energizing, and life-affirming. Spiritually, the transformation can be even deeper. Reconnecting with pleasure is a form of embodiment, a full inhabitation of self. Many women describe a sensation of coming home to their own bodies, a reconnection to the life force that flows through every cell. It is the recognition that pleasure is not superficial or shameful, but sacred. It is the acknowledgement that the body's capacity to feel is intertwined with its ability to create, to nurture, and to transform. When women claim this truth, they step into their own power in ways that ripple far beyond their private experiences. Emotionally, reclaiming pleasure allows for integration of the self. Unprocessed pain, tension, or shame can start to dissolve when a woman consciously permits herself to feel pleasure. The body learns to associate sensation with safety rather than danger. Desire becomes a teacher, showing where fear, stress, or past trauma have created barriers. And as these barriers fall away, emotional resilience strengthens. Pleasure and healing are inseparable. One amplifies the other. On a cultural level, when women reclaim pleasure collectively, the impact is transformative. Generations of silence, judgment, and suppression begin to unravel as women model what it means to honor desire openly and unapologetically. Conversations shift, narratives change, and what was once considered private or taboo becomes normalized as an essential aspect of human health and well-being. Pleasure, once hidden, becomes a visible source of power and authority. Reclaiming pleasure is also an act of resistance. It challenges societal norms that have historically positioned women as secondary to men's needs, as caretakers rather than recipients of joy. By asserting that her pleasure is valid and non-negotiable, a woman reclaims sovereignty over her body and her life. This sovereignty is liberating, creating a sense of agency that spills into all areas: work, relationships, creativity, and self-expression. The ripple effects continue in the physical body. Circulation improves, muscle tone releases tension, energy levels rise, and even hormonal balance finds its natural rhythm. Chronic tension or numbness, often the residue of long-term stress and disconnection, begins to release. Sexual energy and life energy are intertwined. As one awakens, the other follows. The body becomes an instrument of vitality, ready to respond, to create, and to feel fully. Another dimension of transformation is the alignment between mind, body, and spirit. Pleasure reminds women that these aspects of self are not separate. They are inseparable threads of a single whole. To deny pleasure is to fragment the self. To embrace it is to unify the self. Each breath, each heartbeat, each wave of sensation becomes an affirmation that life is not just to be endured, but to be fully experienced. Reclaiming pleasure also transforms a woman's sense of time and presence. In a culture that values productivity over presence, slowing down to notice sensation, to inhabit the body fully, is radical. It teaches patience, attention, and self-compassion. Every touch, every breath, every moment of joy becomes a meditation, a practice of embodiment. The act of feeling becomes the act of reclaiming self, moment by moment. Emotionally, the reclamation of pleasure deepens empathy and connection with others. When a woman learns to honor her own needs, she is better able to honor the needs of others, not from obligation, but from understanding. Pleasure cultivates presence, which cultivates attentiveness. It builds the capacity to hold space for others without losing oneself. It teaches that abundance of joy is not zero-sum. Your pleasure does not take away from anyone else's. It enriches the entire ecosystem of connection. The transformation extends even to self-perception. Women begin to see their bodies not as objects to be critiqued, but as instruments of experience, intelligence, and delight. They recognize that strength and softness coexist. Sensitivity is a superpower, and desire is a signal of vitality, not a flaw. Every curve, every nerve, every breath is a reminder of the inherent intelligence and beauty of their being. Finally, reclaiming pleasure as a birthright instills a profound sense of freedom. Freedom from fear of judgment, from self-repression, from the compulsion to perform. Freedom to inhabit one's own body fully, to explore its responses, and to embrace its wisdom. This freedom manifests as joy, confidence, creativity, and resilience. It is a liberation that is both intimate and expansive, affecting relationships, work, creative pursuits, and self-expression. When women embrace that pleasure is not optional but fundamental, not shameful but sacred, the transformation is total. It is a shift from surviving to thriving, from tolerating life to savoring it, from being silenced to being fully heard, by themselves, by their bodies, and by the world around them. Pleasure becomes the compass pointing toward authenticity, the fuel for empowerment, and the gateway to joy. And as each woman steps into this birthright, she lights a path for others. She demonstrates that pleasure is not indulgence, not vanity, not mystery. It is essence. It is life itself flowing through every cell, every nerve, every heartbeat. To reclaim it is to reclaim sovereignty, to reclaim presence, to reclaim a deep, radiant, unshakable power that has always been hers. This reclamation is not fleeting. It is transformative, enduring, and generative. It changes the way women move through the world, the way they connect with others, and the way they inhabit their own bodies. It awakens the potential that has always existed beneath layers of stress, shame, and disconnection. And when that potential is fully realized, the woman who claims her pleasure is no longer just living. She is electric, alive in every sense, radiating confidence, wisdom, and power, fully embodied and unapologetically herself.